So, Larry, let me start with the markets. They had a pretty rough year in 2022. Can we look forward to something a little smoother in 2023, or is there some tumult yet to come?
I suspect tumult, David. Look, the 30-year story, it has been declining interest rates, the idea that we're moving into an era of low interest rates. That was certainly the thesis that I was pushing with the secular stagnation idea prior to COVID. That's been the basis for a large amount of economic thinking. The idea that we're going to return to that is a kind of orthodoxy baked into markets. You see it when the Fed predicts a 0.5% neutral real rate. You see it in break-evens on inflation in the low twos. You see it in a 10-year rate in the 3.7 range. And that might be how things play out. The forces of secular stagnation, demography, inequality, lower priced capital goods, all of that are strong. But my guess is that just as those who, during the Second World War, predicted that when the war ended, we would return to secular stagnation and a sluggish, low interest rate economy, turned out to be wrong, that's going to be true this time round. I think we're in a new era of much higher government debt ratios. We're in an era, including because of national security spending, of substantially larger budget deficits. We're in an era of much higher investment demand because of resilience investment and reshoring, and because of green energy transformations that are going to happen all over the world. My guess is that this is going to be remembered as a V year when we recognize that we were headed into a different kind of financial era with different kinds of interest rate patterns.
Larry, you mentioned defense spending. Geopolitics figured large in 2022. We've had a real clash, whether it is with Russia over the war in Ukraine or in various ways with China as well. What role will that play, this fundamental struggle, if you will, between democracy and autocracy in 2023?
I'm an optimist. We had a much more politically productive year of legislation in 2022 than most people expected. We had much easier and more reasonable set of political outcomes in the 2022 election, with much less contest over elections than most people expected. So I think, as America so often has in the past, it's demonstrating its fundamental resilience as a society. And at the same time, I think that if you look at Iran, if you look at Russia, if you look at China, the magnitude of the challenges those societies are facing look much greater than they did a year ago. And my sense is that trend is going to continue. And so I think that democracy is going to look a good deal better relative to autocracy a year from now than it does today. One of the great questions of 2023 is going to be whether, as that happens with democracy looking better, China is modifying its policies in our kind of direction towards warmer relations with the United States, towards more support for market institutions, towards more global cooperativeness, or whether they're sticking with some of the wolf warrior approaches that have defined them over the last several years and suffering as a consequence. I don't know which way that's going to go, but my sense is that the tide of history is moving in our direction. And just as it was darkest before the dawn in the period of the Iran hostages and Jimmy Carter's Malaise speech, and it was darkest before the dawn in the late 1960s with assassinations and the President of the United States unable to go speak places other than military bases. I think that people are going to look back at this as having been a period when the United States got it back together.
And finally, Larry, you brought ChatGPT to Wall Street Week this year, in the year of 2022. Is that going to be a major factor going forward? And broader than that, AI, and by the way, quantum computing.
The thing about ChatGPT is, and the thing about the current artificial intelligence, is that we're no longer devising artificial intelligence solutions to particular problems. We're developing generic solutions where you don't have to explain the problem to it. You just have to give it a few examples, and it goes from there. In some ways, sort of like a child growing up. So I don't know where all this is going to lead. But I think that in the same way that we think of a beginning of the atomic age or a beginning of the era of electricity, that these years are going to be remembered for the very different kinds of capacities that mankind developed to supplement its own efforts. Some of those will end up being benign. Some of those, I suspect, will end up being malign. But I think it is going to be an important part of the story of our times.